We're all very human and fallible, and yet we live in a society that rewards pretending we're not fallible, or the range of acceptable fallibility is narrow.
We are constantly comparing our insides to other people's outsides and feeling inadequate and guilty, even ashamed.
Trying to blend in means parts of ourselves must disappear, and we must then live in fear that we will be found out.
Here, together, we will create a space where we can laugh, cry, and carry our suffering and hurts lightly.
In the service of being deeply human.
This is Life's Dirty Little Secrets. Hello, I'm Chris McCurry.
And I'm Emma Waddington, and welcome to the season finale of Life's Dirty Little Secrets. So here we are, a year in, actually not quite, months in, to this incredible journey that started early this year, 2023. And it's been quite the journey.
It has.
It's been so much fun. And today we've decided to do a finale where we sort of wrap up what our takeaways have been over the course of these incredible conversations.
And to talk a little bit about what we've learned along the way.
Yeah, that's right. So maybe we can start with our greatest lesson, these conversations and this whole experience, actually. What is your greatest lesson, Chris?
Well, apart from the steep technological learning curve of having to figure out recording platforms and various things. And before I go any further, I want to give a shout out to our fabulous podcast manager, Ashley Hyatt, and her little company called The Well-To-Do. And she has saved us so many times
completely.
in terms of getting us organized and teaching us about this whole podcast business. We would not have made it this far without her
Absolutely.
humor and patience and expertise. So thank you, Ashley.
Very much.
But I think what I've come away with is I've just been so impressed with how gracious and generous people have been in terms of being willing to submit themselves to a couple of rank amateurs with a podcast that nobody's ever heard of, and we got some fabulous people.
Yes.
And it's just been a great experience. We've learned so much and had some great times. So I'm just really impressed with how nice everybody has been and generous with their time.
Absolutely. Yes, incredible. How much we learn from having conversations with incredible people. I think for me, I've really learned, I know we talk about this a lot, but one of the things that Jill Stoddard said in our conversation with her was the importance of getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been a big lesson for me this year. And that, you really can't have both comfort and courage, because this has taken a lot of courage and has had some moments of discomfort. But it's been very much worth it. I really enjoyed this.
I thank you for coming up with the idea and inviting me along. So this is your child, and it's been marvelous. I've heard once before somebody said your comfort zone will be there when you get back.
That's right. That's brilliant. Yes, we've thoroughly enjoyed all your quotes, and you've
Well,
been a great partner.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
It's been quite a journey, and going to do this again. There will be a season 2, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
That's right. So maybe we can summarize our learnings over the course of the last 11 months, talking through all the different episodes. So kicking off, we did a really fun episode about adulting, which was a great way to start, actually, the season.
We were each other's guests.
We were. And yeah, it was a great conversation. And actually, I've had a lot of conversations since then about that episode, because the concept of adulting is such an interesting one. Somehow we've got it all figured out and that we know what we're doing. And I think we've done a lot of adulting this year with this podcast. And I've definitely learned a few things, but I've definitely learned that I can work through self-doubt and I can be courageous, whether that's being an adult or not.
It's true. I think it was prophetic that we started with that one.
Yes.
'Cause I think at the time we didn't realize just how much adulting we were going to have to do to pull this off. And we did.
So, yes, lots of adulting. You had a conversation with Martin Wilkes. He spoke about the importance of being brave enough to touch despair, which gives you access to your values in that place where, despair and values come hand in hand.
Right. And just the idea that we are not alone, even when
Yeah.
we think we might be, when we think that we're the only one bearing certain struggles. He talked about feeling connected to the bigger world and humanity in general, and that we're all experiencing so many of the same things, in spite of the details, the particulars, that there's a lot of commonality in our sorrows as well as in our joys. I think that was very encouraging.
Yes. I often think about that when I think about the privilege of our job, that we get to witness that very thing because we are on our couch. We have many individuals, families, couples who come in, and there is that sort of shared humanity that we all do share the similar sorrows and heartache and pain. And I feel that I do have the privilege of witnessing that and being reminded that I'm not alone, that there are
Mhm.
many that feel just like me.
So many of the guests that we had addressed these many issues: guilt and grief, self-doubt, moral injury, all of these things that we as human beings bear up under, and how to do that courageously.
That's right. We started with a very courageous conversation with Diana Hill. That was one of our early episodes to Martin, where she spoke about her incredible courage. I remember as we were having that conversation, my compassion and admiration for her went up. And it struck me that there are definitely, and I knew that before, but in that moment, that seeing courage in others does deepen our connection. Seeing vulnerability in others does really deepen our connection to those around us. And as she spoke about her experiences and how that opened her up to, yeah, connecting to her clients in different ways, that was a very, very moving conversation.
It was. We were privileged to be part of that, as we've been privileged to be part of so many of these conversations.
Absolutely. Especially as, she also gave us lots of guidance at the beginning of the conversation as to how to navigate this world of podcasting as a much more experienced and inspiring podcaster, psychologist, and human that she is. So yes, that was a beautiful way to sort of set things off when it came to talking about self-compassion and self-doubt, which we then spoke about with Jim Lucas. I think self-doubt is another one that's so pervasive, isn't it? It's
Hmm.
something that we are always, well, I'm always touching. I can't generalize, but as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people that I know are always sort of touching this experience of self-doubt. And he's framed it in such a wonderful way. He spoke about how there's something very good and something very attractive when he sees humility in others, more so than in those who show extreme confidence. And I remember being really struck by that, that somehow I know that, but it doesn't always influence the way I feel about my self doubt and about voicing my self doubt. That actually I'm much more connected, a bit like what we experienced with Diana, with someone who shows me their vulnerability than with someone who shows me how much they know.
Well, I think that's also a product of age and perhaps wisdom, where you can say, "I don't know," and have that be okay.
Yes. And the beauty is that not only is it okay, it can actually lead to something better, a better
Mhm.
connection, perhaps deeper understanding. I remember once, oh gosh, I must have been 13, and I had a fantastic chemistry teacher, and I was desperate to do well in chemistry, but I was really not very good at it. And he said to me, "You just put your hand up and ask every single question." And I said to him, I remember feeling incredibly anxious and worried that I was going to look really stupid in front of all my peers. And he said, "No, you'll be surprised at how many people have those same questions." Obviously, this is something that many others have been told. But I really did do that. I really did start asking lots of questions. And with that came lots of answers. And then I probably drove him crazy with all my questions. But I actually learned so much and ended up doing very well in my chemistry exam. And that was one of my first lessons, I think, that self-doubt can actually lead to growth.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, it can lead to exploration. It
Yeah,
can lead to
curiosity.
curiosity.
Yeah,
It's like, I don't know, but I can find out.
that's right. That's right. And that's what we spoke about with Jim is that, self-doubt is actually part of caring.
Mhm.
That when we care a lot about something, we are going to feel self-doubt and insecure.
And that ties in with our conversation on the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that was another great one. Jill Stoddard. Yes,
Certainly felt a lot of that doing this podcast this year.
yes. And that was a great moment. I think that's probably one of my favorite moments this season is where you said that you felt like an imposter in front of Jill with all her experience of podcasting. And she turned around and said, "What? You?" Brilliant. That was a great moment. You feel like an imposter? You're Chris McCurry. It was beautiful. It just showed how, none of us are immune to this experience of imposterism.
Just showed how many people I have fooled.
Oh, and I was sitting back enjoying this view, thinking, I'm actually not feeling like an imposter right now. I'm just really appreciating this moment. Oh, such wisdom. But yes, yeah, we don't escape that one either, do we? This feeling of being an imposter. It's so pervasive.
Well, it's like so many of these things, as we've talked about, one never quite escapes them, but you can hold them lightly and not let them interfere too much with what one needs to do.
And that somehow imposterism is, yeah, it's funny that the imposterism is a bit like self-doubt, like the concept of self-doubt and confidence. I remember we discussed that with Jim, how over the course of time, as the more we do something, we might get more confident, but that doesn't mean we become more competent. So
Hmm.
this self-doubt and experience don't cancel each other out. Like we might gain more confidence, but because our competence doesn't always go up, we might continue to experience self-doubt, and how important that is to continue to drive our desire to know more. Like self-doubt equals growth in a way that I don't think is obvious. Obvious, we think that self-doubt doesn't equal growth. It will actually get in the way of learning, but it doesn't unless there is a lot of self criticism. That was beautiful as well that we learned about with Jim is that if there is self doubt and criticism, then that can get in the way of learning. And I think that when I think of the imposter, feeling like an imposter, it's the same thing, isn't it? If we feel like an imposter and then it comes with a lot of shame and a lot of anxiety and a lot of avoidance, there won't be growth. So thinking about imposterism, self-doubt, and growth, it's no reason why they need to get in the way of life. Like you said,
Hmm.
it's about holding them lightly. In fact, there's something quite magical about the way our guests described it that can lead to that curiosity, right? Because they can show us what really matters.
Right. It gets into values. As Kelly Wilson, someone we know who is a fabulous psychologist, psychotherapist, talks about how the reason we're uncomfortable, the reason we have self doubts, the reason we're suffering is because we matter about this particular topic. So it's all connected to our values.
And just thinking about that, I was thinking, where our pain resides, right? Sometimes things like we can get confused by where the problem is. When we think about pain, I was just thinking about the wonderful conversation with Emily Sandoz around body shame and how sometimes we can get very unhappy about our bodies and how we look, and we want to try and control that. And the pain is there, is in the way we think about our bodies. And actually, in a way, that's standing in for other parts. And trying to change our bodies feels like the answer. But actually, yeah, it's not about that.
Well, years ago, I attended a talk, and the person was describing, she put a formula up that was S equals P times R, which was suffering or stress equals pain times resistance.
Oh, that's
So
good.
very often, life is painful, but then we get
Mhm.
into all the this isn't fair, this shouldn't be happening. We struggle, and that makes the pain that much worse, and we suffer for it. We get stressed out by it. And that is similar to what I've often talked about in terms of the difference between problems and conditions. And so a lot of times, situations that we regard as a problem, we try to solve it and we get frustrated when we can't solve it. It's really more like it's a condition. It's like, oh, in my work with children and families, I often had to tell kids, your cranky fourth grade teacher is a condition. She is not a problem. She cannot be solved. Conditions call for coping and adapting and holding lightly. And your parents' divorce is a condition. You can't solve it, and you're making yourself miserable trying to solve it. And there are just a lot of unfortunate conditions that we have to deal
Mhm.
with. And obviously solve problems when you can, but sometimes you just have to cope
That's right.
or
That's right.
adapt, plan for some conditions, but if you can anticipate them. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my body getting old,
Yeah.
and I wake up every morning and think, what did I do yesterday or sometime in the night that made that part of my body feel this way this morning? And it's a
Yeah.
shock, and it's a narcissistic wound that
Yeah.
this can't be happening to me. But getting old is a condition that's preferable to the alternative.
That's right. It is. And Emily talked about this, the concept of flexible body image, or this idea that we want to be more flexible when we look at our body and our experiences, really, never to get too attached. Like you said, this narcissistic wound, never to get too attached to what our mind's telling us about something, and instead hold things lightly and be more flexible around them. With Joe, we actually spoke about self-esteem, and that again is can get really sticky, just like our body image can get really sticky, and our narratives about ourselves can get problematic. And we spoke with him about the idea that high self-esteem is good and low self-esteem is bad, and how we're all working towards having high self-esteem. But really, that again could get us into trouble if we get too attached with seeing ourselves in a certain way, or needing to see ourselves in a certain way, like he described going and playing football with his friends or his potential friends, and how that he started to feel self-conscious about his football abilities. And had he got too attached to wanting to look a certain way, then he may have not gone and missed out. And instead, he is more flexible with it and could, hold that lightly. Such a great term. And went out and had a good time, even if he may not have been the sort of man of the match. He still enjoyed it.
Hmm. Right. It's looking at the bigger picture of, you know, am I here to impress everybody, or am I here to enjoy myself and get some exercise?
Yes. And connect
Mhm.
with those that were there. Yeah. So the self-esteem conversation was a really interesting one, because we often have so many conversations about working on people's self-esteem, that people want to have better self-esteem, that somehow once they've reached their better self-esteem, their life will be better too. Same with the body image. It's like when we're reaching that goal, somehow everything will be solved.
Well, yeah, as if we can attain some sort of state that doesn't get eroded by life events. And we have to be able to adapt.
Absolutely. It's constantly evolving, isn't it? We also, off the back of the imposter syndrome, I was just remembering our conversation with Debbie Sorensen around burnout. And burnout and imposter syndrome or imposterism go so hand in hand, don't they? There's often this feeling that we're not enough, and self-esteem as well, the sense that we're somehow not enough and we're not doing a good enough job.
And if I just try harder,
And if I just try harder, that
because
was,
sometimes, again, it's the conditions under which we're trying to operate that are the problem, which got us into our conversation with your sister about
yes,
moral injury and vicarious trauma, and dealing with
yes,
essentially, you know, dreadful, almost impossible situations and still managing to make the world a better place, but a little bit at a time.
Yes, that was
That
very
was
moving conversation.
it was a very powerful conversation and one of our most downloaded episodes.
Yeah.
Apparently, it resonated with a lot of people, particularly post COVID or whatever this is. It's not entirely post COVID, but we're still reeling from that and trying to recover from
I think, well, my sister's been incredibly brave and she's been talking about it at conferences and telling people about the podcast, which has got quite a reach. And I think what's been beautiful about that is that it's resonated because not enough people are talking about it, about the fact that the shame, the burnout, the post-traumatic stress disorder that people in the helping professions are experiencing post-COVID is because of the moral injury. It's because they worked in ways that went against their values, not because there's something wrong with them. And I think that the really heartbreaking part of it is that a lot of people thought that it was something that they were doing wrong, that they should have done better, but they were put in positions where they couldn't do better. And the feeling guilt and shame was because of that, as opposed to something that they couldn't achieve.
here in the United States, and I'm sure elsewhere in the world, people are leaving the nursing profession, people are leaving teaching because they are burned out and they feel unappreciated by the powers that be. And it's been so draining, depleting, and discouraging that a lot of people are just getting out. And that's unfortunate because those are the very people that are probably the ones that we want to retain because they're the empathic, compassionate, caring ones.
That's right. Yeah. So more conversations about the moral injury and supporting those in the helping professions. And by that we also include, obviously teachers and social workers and psychologists and anybody who cares to do a good job is at high risk of burning out because it comes with the trade that when we care deeply about the work that we do, we may not always do it to the degree that we want to. It's not about working harder, which is what you were saying, that often is the trap with burnout, that somehow we think we just need to do more of something. It's actually, it might be the system doesn't allow for us to do a better job.
We might have to do less, which got
Yeah.
us into Leidy Klotz
Oh
and
my
his
goodness. Yeah.
concept of subtract, where doing more, adding is not always the answer. But it seems to be in our mindset that that's the answer that comes to mind as well. I'll just do more, I'll just add, when maybe doing less is the key to solving the problem or surviving the condition.
That was incredible, actually. When I came across his book and his work, I was struck by how subtracting is never one of the solutions. That he speaks about having this heuristic to add, and it's so true. Conversations that I have with clients, with friends, with myself, always the solution is always to either do more of something, be it more. Even I've had many clients say to me, I just need to go to the gym more or meditate more, or and then I'll be less stressed.
Well, some researchers back in the late 50s, early 60s talked about first order change and second order change. First order change was just doing more. I'm trying to get my car up the hill, so I give it more gas. Works fine. You're on the other side of the field, and I trying to get your attention, so I yell louder. First order change often works very well, but sometimes we have to do something different. So second order change would be, instead of my shouting louder, it would be picking up my phone and calling you on your cell, or it would be shifting my car into a lower gear to get up that hill. And this is something that I often talk to parents about in terms of, more punishments or more rewards may not change your child's behavior. We might have to do something kind of different. And then
That's
I can
right.
say, with humility, I don't know what that is right now, but but together we can figure this out. But yeah, the first order change is that logical, I'll just do more. And it doesn't often solve the problem or help us cope with the condition.
And the other part of that conversation, which I loved, is that we don't get recognized when we subtract. We only get recognized when we do more.
Right.
Like
Right.
nobody's going to say, well done for not adding that chapter to your book.
Right.
Going to be well done for writing 500,000 words. That was amazing. Or, well done for making it to the play, your kids' play, in addition to having a full day's work and everything else. People celebrate us doing more and think that you're more competent for it. And it does definitely lead to burnout. Very, very overwhelmed individuals, including parents, which brings me on to our wonderful conversation with Emily Edlin, which is towards the end of our season, where we talked about autonomy supportive parenting and this idea that she calls it lazy parenting, which I thought was amazing, and the how to do less ultimately in your parenting journey, but not to do less because, yeah, you're a lazy parent, to do less because actually it will work much better for your kid if you do so. And doing less means them being more autonomous. But the key that was really important to remember is that that might mean you do more initially because we need to support our kids to become more autonomous. But ultimately, that will lead to less burnout as a parent. Ultimately, you'll be more subtracting.
Well, I think it means being more thoughtful about your parenting and less reactive. So you're actually thinking ahead in terms of, what do I need to do? And, what do I need to consider in the way of allowing my child some autonomy, some independence, some working it out themselves, even if they're making mistakes and it's a big mess and I have to clean it up, but they're learning while they're doing. And I loved what you said in, I think it was that episode where you talked about the students practicing their musical instruments above
Oh,
you in the
yes.
clinic, and how it sounded pretty cacophonous, but you told the client that's the sound of the learning. And I haven't forgotten
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
learning is messy. And for a lot of parents, myself included, I just want to avoid those messes, but you have to allow your child to make some mistakes and to even fail in the service of their becoming more competent human beings.
That's right. I remember my father said as children, we had to learn an instrument, and he said, but not the violin. I can't stand the sound of learning violin.
Oh yeah. Ugh, like cats fighting.
So you can learn, but just not that. So yes, the sound of learning can be incredibly painful, frustrating, and there's a lot of patience to be had. And I think that's definitely the case I think when we're learning with our children, if we have any sort of element of control and wanting to control situations, that can be incredibly difficult because having to let go of controlling the outcome
Right.
can be really painful.
Right. And something I read long ago really helped when I read that you can't control the outcome, you can only control your effort.
Mm,
So, I can do so much to, make things happen, but there are too many variables, too many unknowns, too many things outside of my control. But I can
that's
focus
right.
on what is under my control, and that's a little scary, but it's also comforting at the same time, which is sort of weird.
It's so true, isn't it? Because I think our journey as parents, and actually our journey as humans, there's so little we can actually control when it comes to outcome.
Right,
I mean, so
right,
many
right.
things can happen.
Oh yeah,
And that's actually, I find that once we notice that, and I need to keep noticing that like every minute of the day that I can't control the outcome. And once I do, there's some peace.
hmm oh yeah,
There's some
yeah.
peace to that.
And it frees you up to focus on what is under your control.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
right.
autonomy granting piece, came out prominently in our discussion with Michelle Dropkin about motivational interviewing. That
Yes, very much.
granting her clients the autonomy to make decisions for themselves as opposed to that finger wagging, you need to be doing this differently. And it actually allows people to maybe step up, when they are given that kind of autonomy and the message that they're capable, you know.
That's right. Yeah, that was another great conversation. She spoke about that fixing reflex and our need to try and fix and tell people how to do things. I mean, that shows up a lot in parenting. I mean, but it shows up a lot everywhere. Like I talked
Yes.
about, wanting to get better at timekeeping and how quickly that invites, well, have you tried this and have you tried that? And how that immediately, the reaction for me was wanting to disengage the conversation and not wanting even to try
Hmm.
because the fear of that feeling of failure was so strong. And ultimately, that piece around autonomy and being in charge of our lives, right? Ultimately, we are in charge of our lives and we need to give people that autonomy if we really want to support them in changing.
Right.
Kind of a paradox.
It is a paradox. As Yes, indeed. And then we had our sex episode.
Oh, yes. Yes, we did. We did. And we're going to be having more from Kristen in our next season. But that was another great conversation and the taboo around it and thinking about how we need to be having more conversations about sex and the impact that and the importance of it in relationships and in connection.
Right. And that the keeping things suppressed or just secret doesn't allow us to fully explore, particularly with our partners, what it is that we hope for and need, and what we can contribute to the relationship, and what our partners hope for and need. And again, as you said, there'll be more sex in season 2. And then
Yes.
we finished with Louise Hayes and adolescenting.
Actually, before that, off the back of the conversation on sex, we had a great conversation of happily ever after with Jonathan Shippey
That's true.
and talking about having difficult conversations, right? Whether it's about sex or it's about what are we going to do about our finances. The conversation with Jonathan was really about how to do conflict lovingly. And I loved his love sandwich
Yes.
um, versus what we usually think of the shit sandwich. The love sandwich was much more appetizing. And the idea that, important conversations that we might shy away might be the very things that open connection and deepen our understanding of each other
Hmm.
and move us forward. And these, how to do so in a way that actually deepens our understanding and not make it about who's right and who's wrong and who's going to win this.
And I really liked what he said about small things often, doing little things for your partner to show your love and appreciation. And doesn't have to be a big deal, but just frequently is really helpful. And I still think about that.
It's so true, isn't it? Small things often, because as soon as we think of big gestures, we go, whoa, that's too much work. I'm not going to do that. And I love that you brought that into our conversation with Debbie around burnout and self-care, that actually it's small things often for
Yeah.
ourselves. Yeah. And small things often in our parenting as well, in our friendships. That conversation really resonated around parenting and families too, not just romantic relationships. And yes, adolescenting. Yeah, that was another brilliant conversation. We laughed a lot.
I learned so much. It was fascinating to hear Louise talk about adolescence is so similar amongst all these different species, bears or rats, or the exploration, the risk taking, all of that stuff that just lends itself to stimulating brain development and socialization and learning about the world. And then we kind of shut that down as we get older, sadly,
That's right. So true.
trying to find the adolescent within
Yeah.
within reason,
Yes.
tempered by the wisdom of later years.
I think I love that conversation because I've always liked adolescents, but with that conversation, I like them even more because they are quite incredible. It's thanks to them that our sort of society, we get to innovate and we get to stretch because they're constantly stretching our view and the way we think about things and the way we do things. And we very much need adolescents in our community to do that. I love the exercise that she described, the someday exercise, and how to keep us in that state of wonder and curiosity that adolescents and children do anyway, by asking ourselves, what's in our someday list? And she mentioned sort of having her someday list in her phone. It was a great way to
remind ourselves.
Yes, of where we'd like to be someday, that dreaming. And have you done that? Have you done your list of somedays?
I have not. I haven't done a list. I've thought about it. Something that I've held on to from my adolescence is I still want to write a novel.
Wow, yes, I remember us talking about that.
Yeah, that was going to be my retirement project.
until I got in the way.
Well, in many things have gotten in the way, but that's still on my someday list.
Oh, wonderful! Really love hearing that. Yes.
So season 2.
Yes.
February.
So we're going to be taking a break from season 1. We're going to be enjoying about 6 weeks. We actually have other things we need to get onto. We have a book to write. So we won't be lounging on a beach somewhere, but
not a novel, but
yeah, not a novel. Yeah, that's on the someday list, but I'll be remembering that. Yeah, so we start our season in February, and there'll be more secrets, more irony, and more sex and some controversy.
Yes.
So lots of fun again in our next season.
Yep, it should be good. We've got some people lined up, and we're going to do one on having a favorite child.
Oh, yes.
And
there's a controversy.
Yes, as well as some other folks that we'll be talking to, and we hope you will join us for the next phase of this incredible journey. And again, I want to thank Emma for bringing me along, and again, Ashley for making this possible.
Yes. Well, thank you, Chris, for being an incredible partner in crime. This has been super fun.
It has been a lot of fun.
To be honest, I didn't know it'd be this much fun. Otherwise, I'd have done this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I
been
agree.
Great. Really great. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you to all our incredible guests.
And thank you to all of you who have been listening.
Yes, thank you. It makes it possible. It's a real privilege and an honor.
And we'd probably do it anyway, even if no one was listening, but
we probably would.
It's so nice that people actually are.
That's right.
So thank you for your interest.
Thank you all, and see you in season 2.
See you in season 2. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Life's Dirty Little Secrets podcast.
If you have any feedback for us or secrets for future episodes, you can email us at lifesdirtylittlesecretspodcast@gmail.com.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Life's Dirty Little Secrets or on Facebook at Life's Dirty Little Secrets Podcast.
We invite you to follow, rate, and review us on wherever you listen to this podcast. It is the best way to get our podcast out in front of new listeners.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more.
See you then.